Hey guys, this is John Parmenter. I run Ride Revival and Outdoor Adventures. I've been working on this 2UZ swapped first gen 4Runner here for the last few months, and we're getting ready to put it together. And I've been getting a lot of questions about the UZ swap, and it's taken me admittedly a lot longer to get to this point than even I thought or what anybody else thought. And it's because I've been going through struggles, and anybody that's UZ swapped anything before, I'm sure kind of understands the pain. But this one's been extra special. I've been trying to communicate it to the people that supplied me parts, and to the customer and to the community, because I document everything I do, and I have a long list of clients that are waiting behind it, and it's caused a bottleneck in my shop, and it's caused a lot of loss. And I was told at one point that the customer told me at one point that he lacked clarity on that. And so I've been trying to express to a few people, and I'm just not getting across what I mean. And so the only thing that I know to do is to go through this on a step-by-step basis. And I started this project on a step-by-step basis. And so I'm going to go ahead and take a time out right now, and I'm going to give you guys some documentation, and I'm going to start talking about a few things and a few of my struggles, and try to make some explanations not only to the customer but to the community, and also the parts suppliers, the people who make this stuff and make it available. I'm trying to do my part to, help the community out and help people in the future. I'm pretty much through the struggles, and I'm going to be able to take care of this and get it put together now that I'm at the point that I'm at. But anybody in the future that's looking to do this, I could really help, and you guys could really help see some of this stuff get cleaned up. So today what we're going to talk about, this is probably the first of a few of these, because there's so much to talk about with a swap like this. First thing we're going to talk about today is the wiring harness, the transmission, the engine setup, the shifter, and how all of that stuff kind of works in conjunction with each other. There's two kind of key players involved in this that helped me put this stuff together and gave me all the stuff to do it. So it's to them, it's to you, and to anybody else watching. So I appreciate you being here. Make sure to hit those buttons for me, and leave me a comment, because I'd really love to know what you think about the project. If you've experienced something like this in the aftermarket industry yourself, maybe a little story about it, whatever the case may be. I appreciate you being here, and I hope this gives clarity to the ones watching and some entertainment to the ones who are newcomers. Thanks for being here. Okay, so in the very beginning of this project, we did a lot of foresight, and you guys can look back on the video feed. I might leave a little flyer there for you for the first one. We did a lot of work to make sure that we were foresighting our project, and getting the correct parts and going the correct direction, so that way we didn't have any hiccups or problems when it come time to final assemble everything. The direction that we went was a 2UZ. So this is the non-VVTi flavor. So this is a 2002 out of a Toyota Tundra. This engine came from the warehouse of the wiring harness company. So this was all purchased through Northwest Toys, and the wiring harness was built by Off-Road Solutions out in Colorado. Mike's been pretty good about communicating with me and giving me feedback and that sort of a thing. So I've been talking to them since before I even purchased the engine, the harness, the transmission, any of the stuff, to make sure that I was getting all the correct componentry. And if you guys look at listings, you'll notice one of the top key things is that this engine package needs to be mated with the correct transmission package, because if you use a factory computer, like a Toyota Tundra computer, and that's what we're using in here, Toyota Tundra Sequoia, and it's reprogrammed for our application through Off-Road Solutions. If you use all that stuff, then that one computer can run the engine, the transmission, and it's also wired and programmed to be able to plug into the body harness and talk to the factory gauges, and then leave the body harness existing from that point on. So everything else works, the engine works, and then this computer can talk to that stuff, and you get all the factory gauges. Okay, so I was told the only way to make this work, because we're dropping IFS, so it's passenger side drop, IFS. The only way to make that work is to go to gear driven R1fa transfer case with the adapter kit for A340e to R1fa to keep passenger side drop, so we can keep our drive line on the passenger side. That's the only transmission and only adapter that I can get to mate onto the back of the 2UZ. It'll go in here, clear the bell housing, the funnel, the tunnel, and then give us passenger drop, because all of the Sequoia transfer cases, the FJ transfer cases, many of the other transfer cases, and all the solid axle setups are all driver side drop. So that's what we got. We got the engine from them, got the wiring harness, the computer, and all the stuff to make it talk together. You can see in here it plugs into the body harness from the factory. The new harness plugs into the new computer, and then we just got to find a spot to mount the new computer. So you get to that point, you get your 2002 engine, your 2002 transmission, 2-wheel drive only, your R1fa transfer case, you get your adapter, you get your wiring harness, get all that stuff, and then the last part of the equation is the automatic transmission shifter. Okay. Now, one of the things that you'll notice in pretty much anybody's aftermarket wiring harnesses or ECU solutions, piggybacks, whatever they're calling them, I've had them called a whole bunch of different things. When you do this, as for the Toyota transmission for the A340, you're going to notice these key words right here. And these are plastered all over the listing. These are plastered all over the instructions. Connect the shifter to the OEM donor shifter. The donor shifter must, big capital letters, must be used when using the donor automatic transmission. A switch required for all shifting functions is built into the shifter itself. There is an additional connection on the donor shifter that can be spliced to the illumination circuit, taillight circuit, if illumination in the shifter is desired. Cool. So that means that the shifter that you get is going to have sensors in it that have to plug into the harness and talk to the computer. I was told since day number one, when I even asked if this was possible, that was going to be the key factor, that you have to retain these sensors. They're mounted to the shifter so that it knows when and where you are on the shifter. Okay? So, okay, that's standard procedure for a custom. You're doing a swap. You're going to have to swap a shifter and put a different shifter in there. Okay, OEM shifter. Okay, cool. Well, this stuff all comes from the companies that have done these swaps. I'm not the only first one. I'm not having this like custom made from scratch. They have this already figured out. They already have all of this done. They've done it to rigs before. They've had customers that have done it before. What I was told is that there's been at least 50 of these sold with minor issues on them. So I'm not the first one to do this kind of thing. And so I'm like, well, what's the best shifter of any of the ones that I could pick? And the LX470 shifter was the one that I was recommended to get. So that's what I got. Now, I pull that thing out of the box, and first thing I notice is it's like huge. And you notice that I have a piece of it in my hand. Let me flip you around and we'll talk about this a little bit more. So I got the shifter on the table, and immediately, here's the width of the shifter. You can see it's all modified, and I've put another bracket on there, and it's cut here, and I have some tape here because I still have to cut that
actually no, I need to take and replace the hardware and drill a new hole in it and shorten the hardware up to finish this all. But anyway, going back to the shifter, there was no conversation about like modifying it in that extreme of a way. And let me show you why. So you can see this kind of cutout right here. Well, it was like that on the back of that shifter. And you can see that cutout there. And then you can see, here's the other piece that came off of this side over here, like this and like that. So you can see that this shifter was actually this wide to begin with. So this arm comes off of it, comes over, and then goes down through the floor. And then it went from here and went down and it went over like that. So if you take this shifter plate, this is what I started working with, and you put this on the floor, on the hump, what you notice immediately is it's way outside of the hump. So now at this point, I'm like, well, that's not even going to work at all. So I've got to modify the mounting pattern of it at the very least. But the other problem is that arm, this one right here, is sticking out past the tunnel. It's way out over here. And then if I move this over here like this to get it inside of there, to actually even be able to get inside, granted it hits on everything like hell, then it puts the actual shifter. See those right there? That was this right here in the center. So all of that is from here over. So it puts the shifter, like it put the shifter hanging out over the tunnel like this. So immediately when I pull it out of the box, I'm like, there's no way that can be right. Like that thing. So I sent pictures of it to the guys that told me to do this, right? And I was like, hey, here's the problem. Like, am I seriously like married to this? Yes, 100%, 100,000%. You're locked in at this point because this harness has to have that. Now, there's a few different shifters out there, and some of the shifters have different plugs on them. And at this point, if you wanted to go to a different shifter, we might be able to modify the harness side to plug into whatever shifter you decide to do, which wouldn't be that hard to depin it and repin it. But yeah, no matter what, you're going to have these sensors in your shifter. And so I thought like hell. I even was like, well, I'll just retrofit these to the stock shifter. And no, it's geometrically impossible to do that. I theorized about how I could put this on an aftermarket shifter. That's pretty much impossible. These are geometrically designed to fit together. Japanese engineers did all that, and I'm married to this shifter. So then I have to figure out how to make this shifter work, because I'm told I must be used in the process. So look, I'm custom fabricating this. This vehicle was sent to me from the opposite side of the country. He's a client that found me on YouTube. Some of you might be watching this on YouTube. And so no matter what, I'm committed. I already have their vehicle blown apart. I already started body and paint. I already bought a bunch of parts for it. I already am committed. And so is the customer. And so I started working with that shifter. And after about a week of working with that shifter, every day in the house, thinking about it, in the shop, literally working on it, then going back to the house and thinking about how to work on it, repeating the process for a week, it got to a point where I, as an individual, as a human, my moral compass, my ethical compass, cut it off. And I said, I can't charge anymore for this because I'm literally standing out here at the bench, scratching my head, thinking about how I can work before I can actually work. And there's so much start-stop where like, okay, I got an idea and then I work, and then 5 minutes later, it turns out that that's not going to work out, and then I got to stop and think for another 2-3 hours before I can try to work for 5 minutes and hope that it goes right. Okay, so I'm in that, trying to force this shifter to work. And let me tell you, I'm explicit with the people that supplied me are telling me this, and I'm like, there is no way that this this is the way it's supposed to be, because. So we go back to the shifter, and there's more to why I'm thinking this at this point. And as soon as I'm starting to struggle with it, as soon as I'm at the point where I'm stopping charging labor and the project's getting hung and I'm not moving forward, I'm communicating with the people that have been giving me this advice and leading me down this pathway and saying that, look, I don't feel like this is right. It can't be right. Because look, I started cutting it apart. And then once I got it cut apart and got it into a small enough physical condition to where it could actually fit onto the hump and go down into it, then I start looking at how it's actually going to sit in and on the vehicle. And so we put this in here, and there's another plate that sits here on top of the transmission tunnel. I had to custom make this. So this sits down on the transmission tunnel, and then the shifter is going to bolt to it after I did all these modifications that I'm about to talk about. So anyway, I get it to a point where it can sit on the floor like this. And as soon as it sits down onto the floor, the first thing I notice is that it's like, I can't even do it now, it's so modified, but it's sitting like this, to where the handle is like sitting on the dash and won't let the ashtray come out, the factory ashtray come out. It's so high in the air. And then we'll also, when I'm doing mock-up, I put the seat in there and I'm sitting in the seat trying to get the general location of the shifters in place, because I don't know yet where the transfer case shifter is going to poke out of here in relationship to all of this. But it's obvious that I'm already struggling here. And I'm talking to them and I'm being told over and over and over again, no, this is what it is. That's the best one. That's the way you have to do it. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And so I'm communicating that with them. So let's put this back over here on the table for a minute. So I'm communicating this with the people, and I'm being told, like I said, I'm being told over and over again, just when it comes to trying to get it into the vehicle, get it sitting into place, get the shifter location kind of happy with where you can sit as a driver, to where everything doesn't feel totally foobar. I was struggling massively just to get to that point. Okay. So I'm off the clock because I'm not making any forward progress. And let me tell you, bottom line is that if I would have charged for every minute of what I was doing and trying to figure it out with this shifter, just the shifter setup and what I done would have cost the customer like $15,000. That's how much time I put into just to getting to this point with the shifter. Okay. So I'm working on it, and we go back to the transmission. This has got to shift our transmission once we get it put in there. So immediately I need to check the throw on the transmission on how it shifts versus the throw on the shifter, how the shifter shifts, and what that relationship is going to look like between the two. Because there's no instructions, there's no pictures. I've dug through every forum that you can dig through and done all the research and all my years and all the contacts, and there's no blueprint and there's no diagram. Nobody shows what that looks like. So I got to get it down into place to see where the arm is and see where the transmission arm is, which means I have to get all this stuff mounted first and all the cross members and the motor mounts and all that stuff. So we're at that point, and I crawl underneath it to look at it, and the arm, as you guys noticed on this shifter, is coming out more towards the passenger side. And I showed you that it was actually sticking out here past the hump a lot. Well, down on the transmission side, you've got these arms. There's a few different flavors of them, and there's a few different lengths of them. So that affects the throw. When you shift your shifter, this wants to actually, it's the other way. It wants to like this, back to get the gears. And it either sticks up or forward, just depending on its orientation on what the transmission and what the original engineers intended for on the transmission side. So on the two-wheel drive Tundra transmission that I have, this is the arm. So it mounts like this, and it sticks off. And then way out here, we've got this other thing right here. And that's what the cable attaches to, like this. And then this sits down into the arm so that you can adjust it. Well, you notice that's a cable, okay? So here's our cable. Why we have a cable? Well, because our 2002 Tundra transmission with this arm on it right here was a column shift transmission, which means in the Tundras and Sequoias there wasn't a console in the middle with a shifter like the Alexis or like the 4Runner. They were all up here on the console. And after everything, I couldn't find a single one that had a shifter on the floor that would lead me to believe that that transmission is asking for a rod. And there's no blueprint, no diagram, no advice, no nothing to lead me down the path of it. So the way I figure it is it's got to have the cable because the shifter and the cable is what controls the transmission. And then at the shifter end, it doesn't really matter at the shifter end. We just need to adapt the end of the cable to whatever style of shifter we have and then match the throw from here, this way, here to here. You measure it and match it to the throw on the shifter so that when you shift the shifter, it goes clink, 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 and the indicator matches the clink, and the clink and the indicator match where the sensor are. Being this instruction manual and everything says must and required, that's mandatory. You have to make sure that all that stuff works in conjunction with each other. Otherwise, the light won't be in the right spot, the indicator won't be in the right spot, the detent won't be in the right spot. You won't be able to go all the way forward, all the way back. The relationship will be different to where it wants to shift halfway in a gear. Yeah, so you just have to adapt it on this side. Well, when we start trying to work on doing that, okay? And let's run through the scenario on that. So we get it mounted finally. We get the plate done. The shifter's in to where it's going to clear everything. It's going to throw. We started with the factory arm. And when you move this with this attached to it, and we're talking about a Tundra setup with a Tundra transmission and a Tundra cable, this moves like this, the same 3.5 inches. That by happenstance, the factory transmission, the 3.0 V6, same throw. Okay. Then I look up at the shifter, and the shifter has a 4.75 inch throw. Yeah, which means that this throw is different than that throw. So we'll have to compensate that somehow, some way. Either we have to change the arms to get these arms the same, which is shorten that one, lengthen this one, or we can do it with geometry. Geometry speaking, if you have a straight line like this, and then you turn it at a 45 degree angle is going to increase this length, this starting length, by 50%. So if you use that as a guide, you can get the happy medium angle to where this 4.5, 4.75 throw arm will move at this end only 3.5 inches because you have taken out some of the slack or decreased the length of the throw via the geometry. So that's where we land. So I'm putting this shifter in the rig. I'm laying underneath it and I'm looking at making brackets to try to hook all this stuff up. And well, we can go underneath. We can kind of show you, okay? So, passenger side throw for the shifter. come under here and we look at the transmission that I was told this was the only one that I could use. The 2-wheel drive Tundra 4.7 transmission out of a 2002 Tundra. That's what that is. And we go over here, and on the driver's side is where my shifter is mounted for this transmission. So it's got a crossover somehow for the shifter that I'm using. Well, so I run the cable in and I'm making brackets. And as you guys can see, I made all this cross member stuff and the transmission mount and the transfer case mount and all that stuff was all custom made. So I was like, I'll just figure out how to make some brackets and get that cable to run reversey style, because rather than coming from the back, it actually needed to come from the front to operate it correctly. And let me tell you, that's where the real struggle started. It was that scenario where I talked about start, stop, to where I would have to think for hours and hours and hours, and then I would work on something, and I would make a bracket that looks something like this. And I'd put the cable in there, and I would try it. My wife was out here helping me. I'm laying on the floor every day. I'm gray. I'm in my 40s. I've been doing it my whole life, and I am beat. Taking aspirins like candies. So anyway, it was a month. 6 days a week, 7 days a week, every day. That's why I told the customer, I'm literally trying my everything that I have to try to figure this out, because it doesn't make any sense. There's no guide. I'm talking to everybody that I can talk to, and they're telling me that this is the way it is, and that there's no more guide than it's up to the installers to figure it out. So I continued and I continued and I continued and I continued and I continued, and I finally, after a month, got this thing cut up enough, here and there, and moved the arm, moved the mount. I still have to go get a shorter piece of hardware. I still have to drill another hole. I still have to finish it all up. I moved the whole thing back and down to get the handle away from the stereo as much as I could. There's no way to shorten any of this stuff up, and I was told that it all had to stay. So we got there. And as you can see, I just got a couple modifications left to do to it, but for the most part, like, she's plate goes in like that, transfer case shifter comes out. And that sits in there. Well, look at it. See how high it is? You can't open the ashtray with it in park. It's all right in front of the screen with it in park. It's just, and it's super high. The factory console is like this low, so it sticks way up in the air. You got to figure out how to make some sort of console for it, all that jazz that I still have to go through to make that sanitary on the inside of it. And we were going for an OEM look. Now, the customer is into this thing, and I'm into it. I've been working on it since December of 24, and we've been talking about the project since August, I think, of 24. So I only work on one at a time. I'm by myself. I don't have a crew, and so this has literally consumed my entirety. And because it's consumed my entirety, it's consumed my family's entirety, and it's been the roughest project for me personally of my entire career, and that's no joke. So it's in there, right? What about the shift? Well, I ended up finding out in the long run, and that was a painful experience as well, that will we'll talk about here first. We'll stay on the shifter for right now, and then we'll talk about the other. This isn't shifted by a cable. That shifter actually is a solid rod. And the reason I know that is because I ended up having to go get another transmission. I was advised to go get another transmission because this wasn't working electronically for sensors. And like I said, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I ended up going to get the Lexus SC400 transmission. When I got it, it had a shift rod on it, and then that's when it dawned on me, wow, maybe this is supposed to be a rod, and maybe I can make a custom rod that goes down and then snakes over and down, and then we'll rock that thing over. And so then I started down started down the road of making a custom rod and making a custom shifter and doing that whole friggin' thing, and it ended up working finally. After I used the OEM 88 4Runner, this might even be for the transfer case, shift arm on the transmission. Then I shortened and modified the arm and relocated the arm. I also modified and relocated the entirety of the shifter, got the sensors into place so that they would be happy, and I got it all shifting and working, adjusted correctly. The indicator light, or the indicator, was in the correct location. Sensors were working, detents were working, buttons was working. The only question that I had left on this is that the late model shifters, you guys know that there's a key interlock function to where you can't shift the shifter out of park unless you turn the key on, and also you can't turn the key off unless you put the park shifter back into park. Now, with no electronics hooked up to this shifter, and this system all being custom wired and mandated to the shifter and the entire system, I've just been reaching in here manually and pushing the little tab down, the little, in case your battery dies tab, you push a little thing in there and then you can shift the shifter. That's how I've been shifting it, because my assumption has been that when I finally get it all connected and I get the wiring harness in there and I power it up, turn the key on, that's going to actuate that lock and let me shift that shifter. Okay, so, okay, all making sense? It's frustrating. I finally got through it. I finally got back on the clock. I finally was able to do some work. All this stuff gets done before paint and before bed liner, before any of the finished product stuff, in case you have to weld, beat on stuff with a hammer, you find more rust, you find more modifications that you need to do. That all gets done before you get it to this point, where stuff's all nice and painted and bed lined and ready for assembly. So I felt like the engine was mocked up, transmission was mocked up, the shifter was mocked up. Now, so I told you that this was a 2002 Tundra two-wheel drive transmission. Two-wheel drive transmissions have the drive shaft that just attaches straight to the back of the transmission. So on the back of the transmission, you have what's called a tail cone. And this was the tail cone from the 2002 two-wheel drive transmission. And in this tail cone, when I pulled it apart, there was two sensors in here. There was one big round sensor right here that when you pulled it out, it had some gears on the back of it. And then it had another magnetic looking sensor like this one right here that usually picks up for like wheel speed or whatever. And so one of them was here and one of them was in there. So my assumption was one's for the speedometer and one's for some sort of transmission shifty output speed thing. Okay, just general wisdom. I'm just making assumptions at this point because I'm looking at what I was told and what I got and comparing it all. So the theory is you take this tail cone off and then you put the adapter in its place, the R1fa to A340e adapter that's supplied by Northwest Toys. So we did all that, and we start pulling the adapter out, and we go to mock everything up, and I notice on the transmission So here's the adapter. Okay. And you notice that there's for the magnetic pickup, and then there is a second hole here, but there's no gear inside of there, and it's not large enough to accept the sensor that came out of here. So we've got one sensor here, one sensor here, and then there's also another one way up there in the front. So I know that this transmission is going to need all three sensors to be able to shift. It says that in the instructions. And it's pretty specific when you look up at any of the A340e stuff. It's like, yeah, it needs all the sensors. Okay, so I'm trying to find another location to put that geared sensor in, because I can get the magnetic sensor in the side of the adapter, but the geared sensor doesn't go in anywhere. I need to drive that sensor to tell the transmission when to shift. So I get back a hold of the guys. I'm like, do I need this? Why can't I plug this in? There's nowhere to put this sensor in. It's like, no, there should be a hole right there. You just put it in that hole. Sometimes some people got to drill it out a little bit. I'm like, well, there's no driver on the shaft to drive a gear. Like to drive a speedometer or to drive a sensor, or like even if I drilled a hole out and stuffed the sensor in there, it doesn't match up to the mounting gear, and there's nothing in there to drive it anyway. It's not lining up with what you're saying and what the instructions are saying. Well, does your transmission have a 3-bolt flange on the back of it, or does it have a slip yoke? What do you mean? Does it have a 3-bolt flange on the back of it, or is it a slip yoke? There's no flange on it. Just the driveline just slipped out. It was just a slip yoke. It was 2-wheel drive. That's what you told me to get, 2-wheel drive. Oh no, the adapter's not made for slip yoke style. It's only made for non-slip yoke, for the 3-bolt style. So you need the transmission that has the 3 bolts on the back of it to start before that adapter is going to work, dude. What do you mean? Nobody said that there was a difference. Oh, I didn't know there was a difference on that year. What? I have the wrong transmission mocked up in here? What? Oh my. Oh crap. So what do I do? Well, you can take and go get a Lexus SC400 transmission. You can get like a JDM Aristo transmission. You can get a number of the car transmissions, and they all have the flange style on the back of them. Well, that's completely different as far as like where it shifts and the sensors, and this wiring harness won't match up to it. And well, you can take it to the transmission shop, and you can have the transmission shop take the output shaft out of the 3-bolt style and install it into the one that you have, and then that'll let you go ahead and put this together. That would enable the adapter kit that you have to work. Because the reason I don't want to just put the car transmission in there is because the car transmission's gear set is much different than the Sequoia and Tundra's gear set. They're a car gear set versus a truck gear set. And all of this work was done, if you guys watched that original video, was done to keep power band and gear ratio as factory as we could. So there we go. That's what we got to do. Just do it. I didn't even express it to the customer. It was just so over it at this point, just trying to move forward. I was like, whatever. I found one on Marketplace from a 98 SC300, 100,000 miles on it, 3-bolt flange on the back of it. Awesome possum. You get it home. Cool. So I need this output shaft because this is supposed to have the gear drive underneath it to run the sensor that I need. So that'll have a gear drive underneath here. So I take this flange off and put the adapter on it, and then I'll be back into business, right? So I take all of this stuff off, and then I go to put the adapter on here, and the output shaft has a bigger diameter and different spline count than what I got. So now I have this whole transmission that doesn't even have the output shaft that I have. I'm real happy about that at this point. But then regardless of that, I get to looking at it and I'm like, wait a minute. That only has one hole in it anyway, and that's the same magnetic pickup that I already can put in the adapter. Like there's no gear under here. You pull this off and there's no driver underneath there on that transmission. So I bought this whole transmission on advice to fix my problem, and it doesn't do anything to fix my problem. And so if I didn't so now this is like 6 weeks of lost time later. The shifter, now I'm onto the sensor, now I'm driving around getting another transmission and spending time and money doing that. And I still don't have an answer to what I'm going to do to solve the problem. I'm committed. I got this engine and transmission and wiring harness and all this stuff here that cost me tens of thousands of dollars on the customer. And I'm the man that's got to make it all work and answer to it. And it doesn't jive, and I have no answer for it. They literally were like, well, I told you that the 98 and up SC400 transmission, this one is a 2002 truck transmission, that's a 98 car transmission. The 98 and up SC400s have a larger output shaft. I told you that. Nobody told me that. Okay, so what do I need then? Because in the meantime, I'm searching for a Toyota Tundra 2002 or Sequoia 2002 transmission that has a 3-bolt flange on it, and they don't exist in 2-wheel drive. There was, and you can call me out if you're wrong, post comment below, let me know part number, whatever, but like there is not a 2002 Toyota Tundra or Sequoia that was made in 2-wheel drive that comes with the 3-bolt flange on the back of it. Period. So yeah, so now I'm like, dude, am I just totally pigeonhole screwed now? Because the transmission won't plug into the harness, and I have this extra sensor that I don't know how to drive. I'm literally thinking about machining the side of the adapter and custom putting a gear on it and TIG welding, and like, I'm committed. I have to be a man of my word. Okay. Well, then all of a sudden, it dawns on me. Maybe that's only to drive the speedometer, because the factory speedometer in here has the same kind of gear drive on it. And so I walked over to the transfer case with the transmission sensor, and whoop, the sensor from the transmission slid into the back of the transfer case, and it dawned on me that's just for the speedometer, and everything on the internet and in the instructions and everywhere else has got to be just, and that thing just runs a speedometer because the speedometer in a Sequoia and Tundra for 2002 was electronically driven, and it doesn't really even matter. So I start doing a friggin' deep dive into that sensor, and in the bottom of that deep dive I find the Haltech website, whose controller that I could have purchased, granted, describes how to hook up their system and to A340e whatever, and it says very clearly that some of the transmissions have a 3-wire sensor with a gear drive on it. It's called the Hall effect sensor. And the Hall effect sensor can be deleted because it only is to drive the OEM speedometer. This is on the Halltech website. So then I go back with this information to my people and some other people. And they come back again and say, yeah, you have to have that. So then I keep reading and I keep digging and I keep looking and I'm looking and I'm digging and I'm looking and I'm in like factory service manuals and all kinds of stuff, and I decide on my own, no, that can't be right. And I put my, basically put my foot down, called BS on it, and was like, no, there's no way, dude. And I need somebody to answer this definitively in a book, because none of it makes sense. And I bought a transmission. I've been running around. I've been off the clock. My customers like, WTF, where's my rig? What are you doing? I got no way to explain or answer any of it to anybody other than to express to you that I don't think this is freaking right, dude. And I'm struggling more than I think anyone should have to struggle with something that should just kind of go together. That's what it's designed to do. It was our researched and developed, and I paid a premium for it. So then it comes down to, well, I'll lay the harness back out on the ground. Okay, and if it's not required, then I don't imagine that Off-Road Solutions would have put a plug in there for it. And so if there's only 2 plugs for 2 sensors and not 3 plugs for 3 sensors, then that automatically tells me that I can delete it, because there's nowhere in the harness to plug it in anyway, so it's not required. So I lay the harness back out on the table and I walk over with the magnetic sensors and the other one, and guess what? There's only 2 sensor plugs. The entire time I struggled with all of that, going and getting another transmission based on the advice of the supplier, the guy who does this. All of the fights, all of the me saying, dude, this is wrong. Dude, this is not right. I don't know. This doesn't make sense. I don't know. There's no space for it. All of that to find out that I just needed to take the sensor that I had in my hand and throw it in the trash and keep building the vehicle, because it's going to work. It doesn't need that. Okay. And then before we wrap up on the adapter transmission area of this conversion and this part of the conversation, I wanted to say something about this adapter. Okay, this is the Northwest Toys A340e to R1fa adapter. Okay, this is the adapter that's supposed to be for this swap for the 4Runner. And like I said, I was told to get the 2-wheel drive transmission with the, didn't know anything about the slip yoke, non-slip yoke. Well, the other part of the non-slip yoke is that when I went to mate this, so there's the output shaft of the transmission that sticks out, and then the input shaft of the transfer case that sticks out, and then there's a slip collar that you put on in between them. That's a 23 spine collar that connects the two. Well, the shaft stuck out like to here, and it said to cut off like a 1/2 inch. And so I did, and then I put the collar on, and the collar was sticking out to like here, and I was like, well, that ain't right. So then I kind of measured it back and did some measurement and did some looking, and then sent the pictures to the supplier, and he was like, yeah, that's because you need that other shaft. And that's not designed to work that way, and I don't think it's going to work that way. You're going to have to, no matter, regardless of the sensor or anything else, and now that you've ran into this, I don't think there's any way to get across this, because that shaft is so much longer, and this kit's not designed for it. And I don't know what the difference is, but I know that it was never designed for it. Okay. So I measured the collar, and I measured the mounting surface here and the mounting surface there, and I go back and forth, and I'm looking and I'm measuring, and I'm like, well, if I take, rather than a 1/2 inch, if I take like 4.5 inches off of it and leave like 2 inches of spline, which is all the collar has inside of it anyway on one side, I should be able to make this side of it work, and then I just need to measure from the mounting surface over. Well, the difference was, the only reason that, you know, they say that this isn't designed for this, or nobody has tried it, basically. You just take the collar and cut the collar down. The collar's too long and prevents the mating surfaces from squishing together. So you just take the collar and cut a little bit off that one, cut a little bit off that one, machine it flat, and then on the inside, you know, I call it chafing. I don't know, the little bevel that's on the inside of the collar. I just literally took a grinder and re-beveled the inside of the collar and remeasured everything out, and the sumbitch bolts together, and the magnetic pickup is in the correct spot for it. It mounts correctly. Everything's happy back here, and it goes A340e to R1fa with no problems. And now the reason that I wanted to say that about that is because I had a problem with that, obviously. None of it's disclosed. None of it says any of that on anybody's website, any of the instructions, anything anywhere. It doesn't say anything about it not working for one transmission versus another. It just says for A340e, period. Is that kit right there originally came from Advanced Adapters. Advanced Adapters was the ones who developed that, and then they stopped selling it because they weren't getting enough sales, and Northwest Toys picked it up. When Northwest Toys picked it up, they didn't make any modifications to it. They didn't put it on anything. I don't even know if they went through the instructions to see if the instructions were still valid or not. So nobody knew. Nobody in all the years of doing this and all the years of selling them and everything else, nobody has ever ran into a situation of this like I did, and they didn't have an answer because of it. And it was as simple as cutting the collar down. And then you don't have to make a guy like me and a customer like this with a build like this run around with a chicken with his head cut off, trying to do something that isn't even necessary to be done, and you're telling them it is. So that means that our shifter is mounted. We got our rail to work. That's operating the way it's supposed to operate. Our transfer case shifter comes up through the floor the way we, can manage with it. I don't really like its location, but it's in there. Everything works. Everything clears, and it's happy on that side of it. The mounts are all done. The transmission's in. All the sensors are accounted for. The transfer case can mount to it, and I can measure for drive lines and build the cross member and do all that stuff. So cool. We did body and paint, and then we bring all the parts in and we assemble it, and we put the motor in, and we get it all taken care of, and then drop the wiring harness on, and you can see the aftermarket ORS wiring harness. And it went pretty much to spec, other than one little, hiccup over here. And they admitted it was more because the instructions were a little bit not confusing, but just didn't describe this section of it well enough for me to right out of the chute put it where they intended it, which it ended up being fine because I've done enough of this and there was enough slack on it that I ran it. I'm going to run it under the brakes. And this is the factory alternator connection that runs in and where the harness picks up its power, and then that runs through and gets connected over to the alternator. And then the starter has one main line that comes off of it over there, and then we'll do another power pickup here to complete the circuit. So that, went relatively smooth. There were some questions with the CCV valve and some of the evap stuff and whatever, but sticking with the theme of the shifter and the transmission, we go back to pulling the wiring through up here. Let me grab my light. So we come back in here, and we've got to pull the main harness down through the factory body harness hole and then connect it to the computer. And then there's a set of under dash wires that run over to under dash so that we can hook up some of the accessories and the lighting, the cruise control, the brake switch, and come over to our infamous shifter. So I start running all that stuff last week. Let's go over here. And I'm following the instruction manual, And it's got cruise control indicator, and this says splice to the brake light switch, and then this one says donor cruise control, and this is overdrive off switch. So in this shifter, the momentary switch, the button right here, is what controls the overdrive. You know, it's 4-speed transmission, and there's only 3. So when you want to go to overdrive, you push the button. Okay, so that's got to hook up to the buttons. Okay, and then there's another one over here that's called ECT that hooks up to the original connector for the transmission controller, for the factory transmission controller. We don't hook up to the controller, but we hook up to the plug for it that's under here. Okay, well, some of that stuff was a little confusing, and so I reached out to Off-Road Solutions, and they started kind of getting me lined out. And then I was going back through and I was looking at it, and then it dawned on me as I was looking through here, this is the harness. Well, illumination, cruise control, overdrive, ECT, that's all accounted for. Where's the plug to plug into the shifter for the required sensors? Where's the plug at? There's no, it's the OBD2, but there's nothing in my harness anywhere. And also it refers to, in the instruction manual, remember we were talking about the key interlock, so that when your key is off, nobody can shift out of park. There's no wire like there is in the instructions for key interlock. So WTF, right? I'm like just trying to finish up in here and try to move forward on something. So I reach out to the wiring harness company, and they get back to me, and he says the only wires that are required for the shifter are the 2 wires you splice into the overdrive shifter. And also there's an optional illumination wire if you would like to hook up illumination to have the shifter light come on when you turn the headlights on. Other than that, there are no other wires that plug into the shifter that are required. Wait, what'd you say? Did he just say there's no other wires? Does that mean that the only wires that are required to make the shifter work are the momentary switch? It's just a button for the overdrive that I can mount anywhere in the vehicle to make the overdrive work? Is that really what he's saying? So I reached out to my supplier and asked him, and he said, no, dude, that's never been explained to me that way. It's always been explained to me that you have to, that those sensors are required. And I was like, that's what you've told me the whole time. And you know, and they know, and everybody knows, I think behind the scenes, how much I had to struggle with that shifter. Time to find out that I could have used the factory shifter that I can't go back to now because I cut the floor open, my body and paint's done, my bed liner's done. And that's what the customer wanted, was the factory shifter. Neither of us liked this big cockamamie piece of crap sticking out of that thing, but that was what we were told we had to have. And I can't modify it any more than I already have. Or I could have just gone to an aftermarket shifter, any of the 1,000 aftermarket shifters that are available for a 3-speed automatic, because the 4th gear is just a button that I can mount on the dash. Like, after all of that, that's what you guys are telling me? Really? Because it says here in the instructions, it was mandatory, must have. It was explicitly preached to me from day number 1 that I couldn't do anything else besides that shifter and those sensors. I had to struggle with it, and that this is the way it works, and that it's the responsibility of the installer to figure this out. And no, there's no instruction manual, and yeah, that's just what everybody goes through. Like, and I'm blowing my top off, and I feel like I'm putting friendships at strain, and I'm like explicitly like, no effing way is this real. My wife's been out here with me the whole time experiencing it, and like I said in the beginning of the video, I don't even know how to express it, and I have not been throwing people under the bus, but like, the customer told me at one point, I don't have clarity over your struggles, and I just want my rig back. Is it gonna get done? Like, I feel like a clown. Like, like people are looking at me like I'm a fool or something. Like I'm a clown. Like, how did you get into this? You should have known better. Like, I do know better, and I shouldn't be in this situation. And I'm trying to express that, and it doesn't feel like it falls on deaf ears, and like, so. So I said that to them, to Off-Road Solutions. It was like, look, and then he came back and was like, well, the reason that we say that it's required is because it matches, mechanically speaking, not electrically speaking, mechanically speaking, it matches up to the throw pattern of the factory shift and drops in the correct location and fits the 4Runner much better than any of the other options. And so that's the one that we recommend. Recommend, not must. Required. Recommend. So now it is what it is. Like I said, I've got body and paint and bed liner and fabrication done, and I'm in final assembly. And now we find out that the shifter, we don't have to use that shifter. So I'm not going to use probably that shifter. I ate the month and a half just to get to this point, and I already charged a customer for that shifter. It cost us like a couple $100 to get it here, and so I don't know what I'm going to do about that whole part of it. But in the grand scheme of things, as you can imagine, if I'm talking about 6 weeks and months of lost time, yeah, it's tens of thousands of dollars of lost labor because I only work on one rig and I can't work on anything else. I have one base shop. Not only that, but like I expressed earlier, I'm getting older and been doing this my whole life, so I don't see the lift in my shop. I do it old school. Jack stands, floor jacks, cherry pickers. It's killed me. And not only has it killed me physically, I've had to struggle through it mentally because I've been continually told over and over and over again that this is required. There is no other way, and what you're going through is typical, and you just need to stay the course and finish it out. I've been continually at every turn saying and expressing that there is no way that this has got to be right, that there's got to be some other way, a better way, a different way. Nope, nope, nope. Required, mandatory, required, must, mandatory, required. So like I said, I'm going to probably not even worry about using that shifter anymore. There's a bunch of different aftermarket options out there, and with everything else that I've gone through and everything that customers got into this thing, they don't deserve to have something in there that they don't like and that it's not required. If they've got options, then I'm going to give them those options, and we're going to put something in there that this thing deserves to have in it and that fits the build the way it should fit the build. I got to eat everything. My friendships feel like I've put friendships at strain. I feel like that some of these companies and people that I've been talking to about some of these issues are just kind of looking at me like eye roll, like there's no way because I look at this and it's not that way and I've done it this way. And like I said, one guy said, I've sold 50 of those kits and never had a problem. Like, I don't know what the deal is. That's what the deal is. And I'm just the guy over here trying to put it together. Doing the best I can with what I have. And like I said, I did the research and felt like that I had all the boxes checked and all the bases covered, and then it's not as advertised. That's not how it's supposed to go together. And here I am stuck holding the bag, and it's just fine. The reality is that there's nothing anybody can do from this point forward to help me get this thing done any faster or to not have had all of those struggles. I'm already through the woods on most of that now, other than having to start over on a shifter because I hate it and customer hates it. But as far as the rest of it goes, I got the brackets figured out. I got the rig in there. I don't need that. All I need is an overdrive button. I know how to hook up the ECT now because he answered my questions. You know, all that stuff's answered. But this isn't right. And I have suffered the consequences for it. I've been looked at and judged because of it. My customer and his family have suffered because of it. And I've not expressed fully what I've been going through, and that's caused judgments on both sides. And I have also been expressing and trying to do my best to say that, hey, like raise awareness and say, hey, this isn't right. But because it's, you know, because there's nothing else that can be done on this one. It's not really about me. I'm not trying to make this like a tiny violin and I'm bitching and I'm throwing. I want people to have clarity. I want the customer to have clarity. I want Off-Road Solutions to have clarity. I want Northwest Toys to have clarity. I want my friend to have clarity so that they can understand and then take that clarity and do something with it and make sure that the next guy who wants to order these parts doesn't have to deal with the instruction manual and the plugs and the shifter and all the stuff that I had to deal with, and straighten it out. Go to the shelf, get the right parts in your boxes, utilize me as a tool, utilize this project while it's here in my shop for your research and development. Like, let's work together. Let's fix the problems. I can't fix the whole industry, but I can fix the problems with Northwest Toys and Off-Road Solutions, first gen Toyota 4Runner conversion wiring harness, and the rest of the stuff that goes along with it to make it so that somebody in their backyard that was watching this could do it themselves. Because let me tell you, 2 generations, my whole life, 42 years old. I painted my first car when I was 8 years old. This has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Almost, I was supposed to have one of the highest levels of support to do this. So, here's what it is. The project's gorgeous. I still think it's going to come out to be everything that we discussed and talked about doing. Like I said, I've worked through most of the problems with this part of the process. And so, you live and you learn. Live and let live. Like, if you can help me make sure that this doesn't happen again, if you can express to me your understanding and that, like, you get it and that I'm not totally full of crap and actually do know what I'm talking about and that this struggle was real, not even that you need to do anything about it or help me from this point forward. I just at the very least want to be heard, want the customer to understand what it's been, and maybe try to help fix it in the future and give some viewers some clarity over how hard this stuff can be sometimes. So I think that covers probably the first video of this series on the 2U Z-Swap 4Runner. We covered the wiring harness and the transmission, transfer case, shifter, sensors, and some of that stuff as far as electrical is concerned. I think on the next one we'll start talking about some of the mechanical, maybe some of the other underneath details with drivetrain, suspension, that kind of a thing. If there's something out there that you guys would like to see before the other, if you have questions, drop them below, let me know. I hope it helps, and I really hope you subscribe and ring the bell, and we'll see you on the next one. Y'all take care.